Hi, Disha. Can you hear me?
Hi, can't see you though.
Okay, you can't see me.
Not yet. I think it might just be loading.
Okay, I'll just try switching on my video off and on. Can you see me now?
Just one
One
second.
second, I'm trying to connect. Yeah, Ganga also. Hi, everyone. We're really sorry for all of the technical delays that were being caused. Uh, Hopefully, it should all be better now. So, one second, I think Ganga just dropped off again. Uh, we'll just add her and we should be back. Hi Ganga, can you hear me? Hi Disha, I think we can't see you now. Have you turned off your video?
Hi, yeah, I actually can't see anyone else, but I can hear you all.
Okay. Okay, I think Instagram is just glitching today because that was what happened with us also earlier.
Hmm.
Thank you so much to everyone who's joined us. We're really sorry for all of the technical delays and issues that are happening. I think it's just something that's going on with Instagram. But I think we can start now. Is that okay with you both?
I can't see you, Swati. I'm not sure if Tisha, are you able to see Swati?
Yeah, I can't see you as well.
Okay, is it just me that you can't see, or are you unable to see both of like the rest of us?
I can see Tisha. I can't see you, Swati.
I can't see
Okay,
either of you. Yeah.
okay. Just give us a second. We'll also see what to do about this.
Hmm.
Okay, I think that just might be a connectivity issue and it should be fixed as we move on. So, shall we start? Can you both hear me?
Yes, yes, I can hear you, Swati.
Yeah.
Okay, so I just wanted to say thank you so much to everyone who's joined us here, even after all the technical delays and everything. We are really excited to have with us two speakers today for this really important and interesting conversation on intersectionality in mental health care, and more specifically, intersectionality when it comes to queer and trans-affirmative mental health care. So I just wanted to start with introduction. So I'll begin by introducing myself. I'm Swati. I work as a program officer in the health pillar at Solidarity Foundation. We are a Bangalore-based nonprofit. We work throughout South India with the sex worker community, the LGBTIQ plus community, and people living with HIV. We work on livelihood issues, on health. We work with them on strengthening CBOs and also on just building more inclusive ecosystems. And today we are here to do this live as part of Project Swastha, which is a project being supported by Sagility Health. And our aim is to enhance the mental well-being of the LGBTIQ plus community through mental wellness workshops and sessions in Bangalore and in Yadgiri, and also to do these sessions such as this Instagram Live with various stakeholders. And we're very excited to kick off today with working with two amazing organizations for doing really important work at the intersections of mental health and social justice, which is Nazaria and the Listeners Collective. So, Disha and Ganga, if you could go ahead and introduce yourselves. Ganga, would you like to go first?
Hi everyone, I am Ganga. I'm a counseling psychologist and also the founder of the Listeners Collective. The Listeners Collective is basically a mental health services organization. We aim to foreground intersectionality in mental health interventions and conversations. We also aim to build pathways to accelerate mental well-being for all, but more importantly, for people in the margins as well as people in unconventional ecosystems or environments that are distant from where mental well-being can be more easily achieved. So that's a bit about
Thank you so much, Ganga. Disha, would you like to also go ahead and introduce yourself and Nazaria?
Yeah, thank you. I hope you can hear me
Yes,
clearly.
we can.
So my all right, all right. So my name is Trisha, pronounced at the end she, and I am a mental health professional and program coordinator here at Nazaria. So Nazaria was started off as a queer feminist resource group, and we work specifically with queer women and trans persons across the spectrums. And as a part of our work, we do advocacy. We work in so we have a mental health unit as well. We have a lot of conversations around gender and sexuality with different institutions, both private and government institutions. And we also do crisis intervention work. So we have a helpline as well. And a large part of the work is to recognize uh, different identities, different forms of marginalizations, and to work on. So that's a little bit about us.
Thank you so much, Disha and Ganga, for sharing about yourselves and your work. Before delving today into intersectionality and why it is important for intersectionality to be practiced in mental health care, Ganga, I wanted to ask if we could start, if you could tell us a little about the concept of intersectionality and a little bit about the origins also of the concept.
it. So I think the word is a little, it's self-explanatory, and there's ample clues in the word itself. But intersectionality, if you were to look it up, Wikipedia will throw a very simple definition of how it is an analytical framework, right? So it is basically a framework that allows you to examine or observe how different identities that an individual holds, how they intersect or interact to create experiences of power, to create experiences of privilege, discrimination, oppression, advantage, disadvantage in society, right? So very simply, it is a lens basically that allows you to sort of examine and evaluate your location and individual's location in society and the resulting experiences of privilege that you may have or discrimination or, like I said, advantage or disadvantage. So that is very simply, that's intersectionality conceptually. Um, it was it, the term in itself was one that was used more in legal circles when it originated. It was used more by legal scholars, so to speak. In fact, the term was coined by a law professor, and it came to be because she observed, Kimberly Crenshaw, the person who coined the term, observed that in courts of law there wasn't adequate nuance that was being afforded to situations, right? So, for instance, discrimination. So, she's mentioned a few cases in the paper that she's written, arguing for the concept of intersectionality, where she mentions if you pick up something as simple as discrimination, right? She talks about a particular situation in which, say, a black man and a black woman who is experiencing discrimination will experience it slightly differently because the black woman, by virtue of one race, racial discrimination, being black, will experience it, plus at the same time, by virtue of her sex, right? So,
Yeah.
sexism will also experience, by virtue of her belonging to a minority gender, will also experience discrimination. And that's not the same as how a black man experiences discrimination. But that is not something that would, that nuance is not something that would come out in courts of law or be given a lot of importance in courts of law. And so therefore she proposed this concept, the theoretical framework of intersectionality, to suggest that something as basic as discrimination law needs to account for. You cannot look at racial discrimination as only something that people of all race, of a certain race experience, and then sexism is something that all women experience, but there are many intersecting um, experiences created by intersecting identities. So that's how the term came to be. Um, it was included in the Oxford Dictionary, Oxford English Dictionary in 2015, and that's when it became very, very popular. And then it just seeped into common parlance in many spaces like civil rights spaces, social justice, even side disciplines now more recently, movements across the board and so on.
Thank you for that. Yeah. Thank you for that, Ganga. I think that the way you broke it down really served as the sort of primer, and even for those of us who knew or who know about intersectionality, it served as a really good refresher also to go back and also look at the origins of the concept. In terms of intersectionality in mental health, I wanted to ask you because we know that today, while mental health is being given a lot more importance in conversations and in discussions in various fields, often the conversations become looking at mental health through an individualistic lens and not through looking at it through the structures of power and oppression which exist in our world. So I also wanted to ask you, could you talk a little about how and why intersectionality is important when it comes to mental health practice, how an intersectional approach can be taken into mental health care, and why is it important for mental health professionals to do this in the space of therapy?
Yeah, still there were multiple questions there, but
Yeah.
start
Uh,
with,
Ganga, if you could also just speak up, be a little louder, I think, because your voice is getting a little faint at times.
yeah. Can you hear me now? Is this
Yes.
better?
Yeah.
Okay, so to start with, I think you asked why it's important for mental health professionals to have an intersectional approach in their practice, right? So to answer that first, I think if I can begin with like an oversimplified reason statement, it would be that very simply and primarily, I think it is so that we are able to accurately attribute sources, right, of disease or distress, so to speak. So, for instance, we plan treatments, interventions for symptoms, for conditions, without being able to fully determine it, is it intrapersonal or is it something that's environmental or systemic, right? So, for example, conversion therapy as well. It's a whole treatment model for an illness that doesn't exist, right? So I think and it's fundamentally, I think it is so that we're able to accurately determine the environmental causes and the systemic causes of distress in the first place. Um, Also to be able to, I feel like as mental health professionals, if we are ignoring the systems of oppression, or if you're not able to see how systems of oppression contribute to mental distress or emotional distress, then we also run the risk of classifying a problem that a client is bringing to you as being just the client's problem, right? It's specific to this client. Or maybe, we run the risk of thinking that it is a misalignment to, say, broader societal norms, for instance. And all of that is dangerous. It's dangerous to be able to think of it as, is this a figment of the client's imagination? Or is this something that is only specific to this client? So not being able to see how systems of oppression also contribute to mental distress is a dangerous um, place to be in for a mental health professional. So just to be able to even accurately formulate a problem statement, it's important to be able to look at it in an intersectional manner. But going back a little bit, when I spoke about how the term intersectionality came to be in legal circles, it's
Yeah.
also important to share that Crenshaw did go on to talk about how there are many adaptations of the term now that are used in a lot of spaces. And she often comes across this and says, I didn't say this, and not all adaptations are really the same as what she conceptualized when she spoke of intersectionality. There's no judgment in terms of if it is a right or a wrong adaptation, but there are adaptations. So now when I'm talking about also what intersectionality means in mental health practice, I don't think it's an absolute definition. It's an operational definition or an operational approach, just so that we're aligned on a very important topic and a very important concern, right? So those are the reasons, just to come back to your question, Swati, as to why I think it's important for mental health professionals to have an intersectional approach. What it looks like in practice, I think, is in mental health practice, it's just being able to see an individual in their entirety, right? The whole of the individual, the different identities they bring to the table, their cultural, socio-cultural, socio-political, socio-economic identities, how those interact, and the ecosystems that they're a part of, environments they're interacting with, systems that they're interacting and affected and impacted by, to be able to see this complex metrics of an individual, of a person and their life in front of you, right? In mental health practice, I think that's what it looks like. I think it also involves educating yourself as a mental health professional about systems of oppression and harm, like we said a little while ago. It's being able to identify systems of oppression and harm. So systems of oppression would be something like, say, a societal system like patriarchy, right? That's an example. So being able to identify that and being able to participate in efforts to effect any change in that. When we recognize that it's a system of oppression, I think that's what an intersectional approach means, or
I
intersectionality
think,
in mental health practice.
sorry, Ganga, I think we lost your voice again towards the end. Uh, like we couldn't, it was very faint.
Right. I was just saying that it means being able to identify as a mental health professional um, what systems of oppression or what systems of harm are. And I was giving an example of what is a system of oppression would be patriarchy, right? So being able to identify that and being able to participate in affecting change in those systems as well. So, for instance, we hear the term mental health is political a lot, right? This is what it means when we say mental health is political, is that you may not be able to adopt a neutral stance anymore as an intersectional practitioner. So it goes beyond the therapy speak of, what kind of a practitioner you are in terms of a model, like I am an eclectic or an integrative practitioner, or I follow a certain model. Intersectionality goes beyond that to being an overarching umbrella or a lens that you bring. It's more to the essence of just the alliance between a therapist and a client. Right? So yeah, that's what intersectionality in practice, mental health practice means, I think.
Thank you for that, Ganga. I think what you shared will help, has helped everyone in the audience, not just mental health practitioners who now know a little bit more about not just the importance, but also how they can go about this. But I think even for people who are seeking therapists to also know what it is to keep in mind when looking out for therapists who, can take into cognizance everything about their identities and their backgrounds. And also they know that they align in terms of that. Coming to you, Risha, as organizations working with the LGBTIQ plus or the gender and sexual minorities community, we know the importance of queer and trans-affirmative mental health care. And we also know that a large number of people from the community are also people who come from socioeconomically marginalized backgrounds. And that's why it's even more important to keep in mind or to take an intersectional approach, especially when it comes to queer and transformative mental health care. But before that, I wanted to ask, as a queer and transformative therapist, could you talk to us a little about what does it mean to practice queer and transformative mental health care? Sorry, Disha, could you hear me?
Sorry, I just lost you for the last few seconds. Could you repeat?
Can you hear me now? Is it any better now?
Yeah, yeah, I can hear. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
better.
I was
Yeah.
just asking. Yeah, I was just asking if you could talk to us about what does it mean to practice queer and trans-affirmative mental health care, and what does it look like? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think just to start off, I think one of the things that Ganga mentioned, I think would be maybe like a good way to start off this conversation, which is that how systems of oppression, impact mental and emotional well-being, and how acknowledging that is crucial to even providing any form of support or care, and not doing any form of harm. So just that importance of acknowledging that is one of the reasons, maybe the need for an affirmative lens comes up, right? So when we talk about this um, queer and trans-affirmative approach, it's basically not just an acknowledgement of, but also it is an active engagement. I feel an active engagement with all of all of these understandings and active engagement with a queer lens. And what do I mean by a queer lens? So traditional forms of psychotherapy, traditional forms of mental health have also always been based on, trying to tell us or teach us what is normal and what is not normal. And when it was designed, of course, by a group of people. And so what is normal and what is not normal was also an understanding that shifted according to that. For example, traditionally, when we think about gender and sexuality, we know that there is this understanding of two bodies, two sexes, two genders, and one type of relationship. And there is this understanding that is reinforced in different ways. The relationship escalator and all of those stages that you know of, how um, start off by maybe marriage, and then you live together, and then you have kids. All of those things are also reinforced in practice of mental health care, right? For example, when I had a conversation once with a person who practiced with families, they spoke about how um, family planning is an essential form of the goal setting that they do, and that also led us to discuss, what kind of family are we envisioning when we are talking about this form of goal setting. So that goal setting process, where we are talking about what should be desired or what should be, the outcome, is also being impacted by these ideas of normal. Um, um, when we talk about, another example would be when we talk about sexual dysfunction or our understanding of sexual dysfunction. There is this, I think, sexual arousal deficit that we talk about, hypoactive sexual desire disorder, all of these different categorizations that have come up. And these categorizations are also based on this understanding that, there is a particular normal type of or level of range of sexual attraction, romantic attraction that people should be experiencing, um, which would, in a lot of ways, automatically put a lot of ace people into a sexual dysfunction category. So there has been a long history of this form of pathologization, even criminalization of all non-normative experiences. And for a formative lens, the first thing would be not just acknowledging how these systemic institutions and systems of oppression impact and harm people, but also how even the mental health care system in itself has historically, harmed people, and also categorized them as normal, not normal, because these categorizations don't just exist in theory, they exist in us, in our lives, in our bodies as well. So I think that would be the first thing, would be just identifying that, knowing that, and knowing the different types of stressors that people experience and how they manifest for a particular person, because they would not be manifesting in the same way for two different people. So, for example, if we talk about visibility, a lot of times visibility can be seen as, a desired outcome or a desired impact. But when we look into it a little, we also start thinking about how, it's important to consider a lot of things here. For example, who is who am I being witnessed by? And what lens or what gaze am I being witnessed by? And when we talk about gaze, a lot of times we also understand that gaze also in a binary of, either if we're talking about, for example, heteronormative gaze, then for a queer person to exist either in resistance to that gaze or in conformity to that gaze. So, like how, if we get into it, we also start to understand that one way for us to, or there is no rule for us to sort of make sense of how people experience themselves, experience their gender, experience their sexuality, and other stuff. So these are a few things that I think would be very, very important in uh, using and practicing a queer trans affirmative lens. And also apart from this, I feel like we do talk about concerns a lot, but there are a lot of strengths, a lot of joys, a lot of community wisdom that also would be important as a part of that process to acknowledge, because um, uh, it would be again stuff um, that that is supportive, that is essential for survival. And I think engaging with those parts as well helps. And lastly, just for us to also as professionals to know that our own the therapist self also comes in different ways in that space. So we are never really free of our own biases, of our own understandings, of our own perspectives. So us not just like engaging with it in a vacuum, but constantly engaging with what's coming up within us in the therapy space, and engaging with how that might be impacted by our positioning, by our own biases, by our own understandings, by our own moralities, all of those different things. I think that can be very, very useful as like a continuous practice as well. Um, so I think these are a few things. I'm so sorry I can't see anyone, so I don't know how people are responding.
No worries. Those were all really great points, Disha. Thank you so much for sharing. To go further into this, I wanted to ask you, you've spoken, and I think you've already covered some of this in your earlier answer. But I wanted to ask you, how does an intersectional approach come into play, especially, given our socio-cultural contexts when practicing queer and trans-affirmative mental health care?
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I think I'm also sort of going back to what Ganga shared, and I think it just sort of ties in beautifully here in understanding how we cannot see this as a separate part. In fact, I think intersectional approach would be so necessary to actually work with a queer and trans affirmative lens, because it takes away that binary of oppressor and oppressed, and just understanding the fact that us engaging with it in that way would might actually end up doing more harm, and might actually end up decontextualizing everything that's going on. Right. So I think this also makes me reflect on how we often tend to look at certain communities as homogeneous, or it's easier for us to think of it in a homogeneous way, because that that's just how we work. And doing that can take away a lot of the things that we want to work with in therapy. It reminds me of, in fact, a mistake that I've made once with a client where the client came from a very different experience and location based on caste and class. And for me, um, the form of, guilt and around my privilege that came up actually ended up making it difficult for me to, in any point, um, you know, disagree with the client or come in our work. And not only did that hamper how we were working, because it did not allow me to challenge the client or do anything, but it was actually a disservice to who that person is, because for me, again, that gaze that was coming in, that very privileged gaze was also just seeing them as one identity and not considering, them in their entirety, seeing all of the other things that they're bringing to the table. And so like that understanding actually helped me to challenge them, and it strengthened our relationship in the end. So the need to consider the person in their entirety, as Ganga mentioned, I think is very important. And also for the queer trans community as well, even within the community, our understanding of queerness is not isolated. Our understanding of queerness or transness is being constructed by, our caste, our class, our positioning on our whether we have disabilities or not, by people um, having so many vast experiences, even within the community of identities, of life. So, knowing that, I think it becomes very important to not just engage with it as like a homogeneous um, experience. And I think that is also part of that queer lens that we were talking about, is being able to approach it with a lot more curiosity and openness, and exploration of that person and their world, um, rather than just a larger systemic binary understanding of it. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Disha. I think also you drawing upon your own work and giving us examples was also something that really helped make it more tangible and also for understanding. I wanted to now ask the both of you, you've spoken at length about intersectionality when it comes to therapy and how it plays in. But I also wanted to ask you, as people working in the NGO space, in the nonprofit space, I know that we also do work in creating mental health programs for marginalized communities. And for those of us who want to do mental health work, for those of us nonprofit professionals, or in general, like for people who want to create mental health programs for communities or mental health based interventions, what would be your advice, or how would you say we can bring in an intersectional approach there? Either if you can go first.
Would you like to go first?
Sorry, Ganga, we could not hear you.
Just checking with Disha if they'd like to go first.
Um, I'm okay with anything. I'm sorry, I can't see anyone. But
I
yeah,
mean, I
Ganga,
can go first.
you can.
So,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So, I think there are a couple of, I mean, I think there are two aspects to it. One is when you're doing mental health care work, how do you integrate an intersectional lens? And two is when you're working with marginalized communities, irrespective of whether that's mental health care work, how do you integrate an intersectional lens, right? And I think so, irrespective of that, I think primary and most important, in my opinion, is just flexibility. I think anyone that's working with uh, marginalized groups or working for minorities, it is very, very important to be consistently and adequately effective throughout the period of your engagement. What Disha said as well about being actively sort of questioning, actively sort of inquiring of yourself as well as to what are you bringing in the interactions that you have with the community that you're working with, what are your own biases and so on. So, for instance, I think someone had once, when we were introducing our work to them, and we said, we work, to foreground intersectionality in mental health. They said something along the lines of, but then what is that? What is intersectionality in mental health? Because isn't that just supposed to be a part of mental health, right? Why would you have to spell it out? And in my head, I'm thinking that um, since when has what should be really translated to what actually is, right? And I think it's very easy to forget intersectionality as a lens. It's not something that comes automatically, especially for the side disciplines. I feel like it's not something that we are very adequately trained in to consider, right? We are trained to scan for symptoms of, again, illness or disease, so to speak, and not necessarily taught to sort of record and accurately capture, okay, what are identities as well, or what's contributing in different ways to a certain problem. So I feel like in these situations, it's okay to err on the side of overdoing it, especially given the political climate that we are in, as opposed to underdoing it, with reflecting, with inquiring of yourself. So, what is the power you hold when you enter a community by virtue of certain identities? Social workers, for instance, automatically and intrinsically get assigned some power by the community they're working for, only by virtue of, again, the position, right? You're bringing something to the community. That's how it's been historically. So that automatically gives you some privilege, some power in place. So being able to sort of moderate the effects of that, and really understand what that looks like when you are working with a group. So reflexivity, I think, is the most important tool for any practitioner in this space. There's also the other way around, and so for us, in fact, for the work that we do, especially the psychosocial programs that we do, they are primarily mental health programs, either mental health literacy or very small group interviews. So there we try to integrate intersectionality in the sense of, by virtue of the community that you're a part of, or the group that you're a part of, what are your experiences, and this can also be trauma, which we haven't spoken about yet, right? So, for instance, if you're working on, say, the area of gender-based violence, to be able to recognize that by virtue of being a survivor of gender-based violence, there is trauma that you have experienced, and how do you equip the community? So there you are bringing in a mental health lens. Your intervention primarily is the mental health lens and the mental health skills and tools and so on, mental well-being. But in the background, you have the context of what has created that problem, right? And that's where your intersectionality comes in examining what's the fallout or the outcome of belonging to certain groups. So intergenerationally, there are experiences that people have that contribute to distress. And so then that is addressed through a mental health program. So I think there's fundamental pre-work that needs to be done before you enter a community, which is, I think, aided by reflection. And there are ample tools available, I think, on the internet as well, that aid that sort of self-inquiry and exploration for practitioners. And then there's work that needs to be done before you even design a program that considers several aspects of what needs to go into it, and then while you're at it, so the whole pipeline.
Sorry, Ganga, I think we again lost you for the last few seconds. Like it was very faint.
Yeah, I was just saying. So I feel like reflexivity is the most important tool, and it gets used across different stages of the whole pipeline for when you're implementing a program. From the time that you conceive it, design it, deliver it, there's pre-work in between there for people who are actually on the field, and then during the length of your program and after, through debrief and so on. So that, and apart from that, I think we already spoke about what does intersectionality look like in practice, in practical ways. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Ganga. Disha, would you like to also go ahead?
Yeah, sure. I think Ganga's already elaborated on a lot of really important points. I was also reflecting on, the work that I've had the opportunity to do with communities, and one of the biggest learnings that I've had is that communities are are always, responding to their own needs in different ways. There are so many built-in um, know-hows, as they say in narrative therapy. There are so many built-in know-hows that communities have that about what they need, about how to, address their needs and how to respond to the challenges that they're facing. And I think more than, like, even though we've already moved away from this idea of inclusion, but the idea would be also to know that our job sometimes can be just to, amplify the work that they're already doing, or amplify the work that they have been doing for so long in their communities, and support that in any way that we can. Because the support that we provide has to be very contextual, it has to be something that um, like we say in therapy, we want to meet the client where they are, and we want to be able to see what kind of support the client would need. The client usually is someone who ends up telling us what they need. They are the ones telling us what they need. So I think similarly with communities as well, that understanding can be really helpful in in working. So it's not just about bringing someone in for the design and implementation process, but also maybe seeing how we can work with um, existing systems, mechanisms, as we already said. And I think one other thing that you know I was also thinking about, which is that like just this understanding of trauma, it came from what Ganga shared, also led me to uh, think about how safety, and we talk about safety a lot, but safety in itself is not something that is present for every person in every space, right? In fact, safety is not something that is inherently present in the therapeutic space as well, in the therapy room as well, because of so many different things that we've talked about today. I think that is also something that is very important to consider when designing any of these programs and working with any of these programs, is the fact that safety would again be something that we would have to actively keep engaging with constantly, and seeing, because it would translate into so many different things for, even if there are 5 people in the room, it would look different for everyone. So there would be not one particular thing that we can do and say that, okay, now this is a safe space, but rather what would be the ways in which we can create more pathways for people to, like, respond to their own needs, to their bodies, to their needs for safety, whatever might be coming up in that engagement, like that's something that I feel could also be something to be incorporated for a more intersectional approach.
Thank you so much, Tisha and Gaga, both of you, for sharing. I think the points that you mentioned will really be helpful, not just for people in the audience, but even for us. I think I've also learned a lot today, and I feel like these discussions can go on for a really long time. But unfortunately, I think we're running out of time right now to be taking any questions also. We will definitely be taking questions later. For anyone who has any questions, you can send them to us, any three of us also later. I just wanted to say thank you so much, Disha and Ganga, both of you, for joining us today and for spending so much of your time with us and for sharing your knowledge and insights. I think these are very important conversations to be had, and hopefully today is just the start and it can spark a lot more conversations. I also wanted to say thank you to everybody who has joined us today. Unfortunately, we don't have time to take any questions or comments, but you can definitely send them to us later on our profiles. And we will also be sharing resources later on our stories, because this was just an introduction. And for those of you who would like to learn more about these concepts, we'll be sharing them on our stories. So you can keep an eye out for that also. Risha, is there anything else you would like to add?
I'm good. Thank you so much, Swati, for having me.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything to add as well, but this was an amazing experience for me as well. So thank you, Ganga. Thank you, Swati. Thank you to everyone else for being a part of this.
Thank you so much to both of you. I think this was a really good first live for us also as the health team. And again, thank you for just joining us today and for agreeing to be a part of this. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
See you.
you.
See you all. I think we can end the live now. And thank you, everyone. Keep an eye out for the stories. See you all. Bye.